corners of this world into this webinar. Now, in the COVID world of non-contact domains, we've certainly embraced digital competitiveness with the launch of our program, SICOT Pioneer. And through this platform, we've done over 30 events. And through this platform, we've actually reached out to over 110 countries and have had 60,000 views, over 60,000 views. So big thank you for joining in and following us. Now, in this episode, rather than the usual webinar format, we'll be having a conversation with individuals who've made a global impact on healthcare. In our episode today, myself and my partner in crime, Dr. Gaurisan Trivendran, will pick the brains of Professor Kirsty Weber, who's been on our show before. Thank you, Kirsty, for being here. And Dr. Jennifer Green from Australia, who are the President and Vice President of IODA, respectively. I'll get Dr. Gaurisan Trivendran to introduce them formally and kick off the show. Gau, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vikas. Greetings to everyone joining us on the SICOT Pioneer webinar on diversity worldwide. I'm Gaurisan Trivendran. I'm the Education Academy Chair for SICOT. And now, without further ado, a formal introduction of both our distinguished panelists for this evening. They both need no further introduction, but in no further order, Dr. Weber is the current serving director of the sarcoma program at the Abramson Cancer Center. She specializes in children, adults with benign and malignant bones and soft tissue tumors, limb salvage surgery around the shoulder, hip, knee, pelvis. And she has built a collaborative sarcoma research team between clinical and basic research at Penn Med and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She was elected to the Penn Academy of Masters Clinician in 2017 and recently served as the president of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. And I should say, the first female orthopedic AAOS president ever elected. She's been recognized by multiple different panels and awards, including America's Top Doctors, Best Doctors in America, and the Philadelphia Magazine. Kirsty, welcome to SICOT Pioneer again. It's a pleasure to have you on this panel.
Both of you. Thanks to be here.
Our second panelist is Dr. Jennifer Green, who is an Australian orthopedic hand and wrist surgeon and a founding member of International Orthopedic Diversity Alliance, IODA. Dr. Green originally trained in orthopedics in Sydney, Australia, and she completed a hand surgery fellowship at the Indiana Hand Center in the US and in Paris, France. She has been practicing as a hand and wrist surgeon for more than 20 years. Dr. Green is an immediate past chair of the Australian Orthopedic Association, Orthopedic Women's Link, OWL, and has been a driving force in working towards the goals of AOA diversity strategy. She has served on the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons, Women in Surgery Committee, RACS ACT State Committee, AOA Cultural Diversity and Working Group Inclusion Committee, as well as being the AOA representative to the Diversity Council of Australia. Dr. Green is the current Australian Hand Surgery Society representative to Asia Pacific Federation of Societies of Surgery, APFSSH, and has previously represented AHSS at the Australian Ethical Healthcare Alliance. She sits on the Asia Pacific APOA Hand and Upper Limb Committee and an active member of AOA Champions of Change, and is passionate about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in orthopedic surgery. Jenny, welcome to SICOT Pioneer, and it's a pleasure to have you on this call.
Lovely to be here.
Right. Now, without further ado, I will kick off with some very general questions, just for the benefit of our audience. Jenny, if I don't mind, I'll start with you. Just to get the definition straight, what is diversity? Or at least applied to us as practicing orthopedic surgeons? And how did this kick off the journey with IODA?
So really, diversity is a very broad term. We think a lot in orthopedics about gender diversity just because it's one of our major areas of need. But diversity really includes people of different cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, people who have disability, and any other cultural or social difference that you might find. So my diversity Jody kicked off when I became the Orthopaedic Women's Link representative in Australia, and I really became quite interested in diversity and learned a lot through the Diversity Council of Australia. I then had the opportunity to be in touch with PC Chai, who at that time was the Malaysian Orthopaedic Association president, and I realised she was gathering a lot of data and going around really Asia and the world promoting women in orthopaedics, and she really inspired me. Not long after that, I went to the American Orthopaedic Association leadership meeting to talk about our diversity strategy with the board. And it was there that I first met Christy and some of the other members who are now on our committee, AJ Johnson, who is the American Academy chair of the Diversity Advisory Board, and Matt Schmitz, who runs the Military Academy in Texas. So that's how it all came to light.
Fascinating story, Jenny. Fascinating story. Yeah, PC Chai is an awe-inspiring speaker. She's not too far from where I am, and she definitely commands an audience. So coming back to IOTA, Jenny, so it's relatively new, and tell us a little bit, for the audience watching, what is the mission and vision statement of IOTA?
Well, we are still developing our mission and vision statements, and they will be soon available, but we are really aiming to champion diversity on a global scale. You know, IOTA started with these networking of people who are all interested in diversity, and then it expanded around the globe till we had about 45 founding members from 6 different regions getting together and decided that we were all passionate about doing something on the world stage to network all our individual work together and advance each other's attempts to increase diversity in our specialty.
Lovely. Thank you, Jenny. Vikas, I'll hand over to you.
So, Christy, similar questions to you. Tell us about your journey with diversity. You've certainly done a fair bit with the American Academy, and then now on the international front. How did you get interested, and what was your experience with the Academy in your year as president?
Well, thank you. Thanks again. I mean, I think anybody who's underrepresented in orthopedic surgery probably has somewhat of a passion for making the field more welcoming to those who are underrepresented. So I've always been passionate about, like wanting to see more specifically women in the field. And so, being a part of the Ruth Jackson Orthopedic Society in the United States and serving eventually as the lead for that was a great start for me in a formal way. Working with the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons over the last several years, I think probably the key step that was taken during my tenure was the development of a strategic plan for the organization in a more detailed way than we had done before, with metrics and objectives in various areas. And one of the critical pieces was, one of our goals was in part to increase the diversity of the Academy's board and volunteer structure, and with very specific strategies and objectives around that developed by our Diversity Advisory Board. And so, saying that we want to increase diversity is one thing, but really measuring it and having goals, you have to measure it, or you're not going to achieve it. So that was exciting, and it started a whole effort that is very focused within the AAOS. It's a long time coming, and it's going to take a long time to really get where we want to go, but it's a start. And then from IOTA, this is really all credit to Jenny. This is Jenny's vision and Jenny's hard work that have gotten this off the ground. And, being able to pull in folks from around the globe is nothing short of remarkable when people are busy and have other things to do. So I think it speaks to the importance of the topic and the passion of the folks that Jenny's been able to pull together. And so I was thrilled to be asked to be involved. It's been really It's been inspiring to meet people from around the globe that are interested. And I would say one of the most interesting things is to find that there are differences. You get very focused in your own country. And, in the United States, I know what some of the challenges are, whether it's gender, race, or others. But then you talk to people from Saudi Arabia, South Africa, the UK, and there are different challenges and different issues. And so it opened my mind about that. And I think that, like Jenny, I'm incredibly excited about IOTA and, the impact that we can have on a global scale. We certainly want to champion DEI around the globe, and we'll have some actual metrics around that as we work through that with our board. And we really want to see, a different type of culture, where people feel like they belong, where people can achieve the career goals that they want. And that's something that we're looking for.
That's great, Christy. So I suppose before orthopedic surgery, it starts right at medical school, okay? Because that's when people get inspired to pick up the specialty. That's when people want to do either nephrology or orthopedic surgery. Is IOTA looking at that as well? Because certainly in terms of the UK, there are certainly a large number of, in terms of the gender diversity, certainly a large number of female medical students joining the med school. But then in terms of orthopedic surgery, we do not see that much of output when they finish the med school. So are we, or should we be targeting this agenda right at the medical school, right at the grassroots where it actually all starts? What are your views on that?
Who are you asking?
Both of you. You can take it first, Christy.
I'll make a comment, and I'm sure Jenny will amplify my words. It's, I think IOTA specifically, we're working on some really measurable goals to get the organization off the ground, and there's some organizational work that has to be done first when you have a new group. But we certainly see expanded work over the years ahead. We welcome members that include medical students, and one of the things that IOTA has been able to do is really get out there on the global stage with information for our members and others in the forms of virtual webinars and symposia, resources on our website, so that, I suppose that's available for med students, but it's not directly targeting them. There are many pipeline programs out there to work with folks in the medical school environment. I'm not sure that we have the reach specific to that right now, but I'll defer that to Jenny.
Yes, so I think we all know about the supposed hidden curriculum in medical school that tells students that they shouldn't become surgeons if they're female, or they don't belong if they're the wrong nationality, that it's a surgeon club. And we really need to break down these problems. And the only way you can do is to reach out, because most of the time it is not actually orthopedic surgeons who are delivering these stories. It is our colleagues who are not orthopedic surgeons. So although we are creating visible role models, and that is really important, we're open to medical student membership, so they can access our webinars and resources. They can see people that look like them, whether they're female or of a certain background or they're LGBT. They can see people that look like them who are orthopedic surgeons, and that is really very, very powerful. So it's getting that imagery out there, getting those videos, getting those presentations. That is one way we can be really effective in opening the door for others. We're running workshops for young women in medical schools in Australia, and we're running them around the States. So, some of the work we want to do is really provide strategies that are working so that other people can adopt them. There are some great things going on all around the world, but if we can all get together, we can really amplify those strategies and deliver them to everyone.
Oh, thanks, Jenny. Thank you.
Jenny, I'd just like to kind of share our own personal experience in SICOT. Then I'd like to tap on your experience and how we could make it better. Actually, under the guidance of Vikas as Education Academy Chair, we tried to make our subcommittees a lot more diverse and get representatives from the different continents. And this was something that we've been working on for the last 4 years. But often the feedback that's come back is that, well, we don't have these specialties represented in this part of the world or in these continents. And so we will have to go with someone else from, I don't know, South America or Europe instead. And that's been a constant recurring issue. And again, I think we've touched on this very nicely in that it's very much a grassroots problem, in that if there aren't enough orthopedic trainees of a certain diverse group that are picked and they don't come up to represent the specialties, then there's a very difficult cohort to actually pick on. And here's the tricky question, Jenny. How do we address this issue when we have 120 member nations in such a big society with, such big problems? What sort of answers can we give them? I just feel it's frustratingly slow that it's taken so long to actually start having this discussion now. And I mean, it's great that the American Academy has had its first female orthopedic president last year. SICOT still hasn't had one. Is that right, Vikas? We're still lagging behind, but I hope we'll get
Australia
that.
has had one first just now. So,
awesome.
Annette Holland. So that's exciting for Australia.
So, Jenny,
Malaysia has had 4.
Yeah, absolutely. There's clearly a difference in the global standards. So, Jenny, how do we address this when we have so many different cultural codes and countries part of a larger organization, and there's clearly a grassroots issue that's going to take many, potentially decades to sort and fix? Any thoughts?
I think really you need to start at the basics. Unfortunately, when you have a global organisation, it looks diverse because you're taking someone from every nation. But the individual diversity, and I have another colleague who sits on an international board that has spoken about how strange it is, because it looks diverse, but in fact, these people come from very non-diverse orthopaedic groups, organisations. So I think we really need to educate people about the advantages of being diverse, and there are very strong advantages for business. There is, there was a landmark paper in 2015 by McKinsey in the corporate sector, and they showed that organisations that were more diverse, they got the top talent because they were picking from the whole pool, not a smaller part of that pool. They were much more innovative, and they made better decisions. They even were more profitable. So we need to just get this message home, because being diverse is not only fantastic for the patient, because a more diverse workforce changes and challenges those healthcare inequities, but your organisation actually is better. So it's a win-win. And we need to educate organisations, all the orthopaedic organisations who haven't yet taken that step to develop a diversity strategy, and there are not many of them who have. Great to see the American Academy has, Australia has, New Zealand is now doing it, Canada has, we know Britain did launch theirs in 2020, but there's still a lot of nations that do not have a strategy. So it's very important that we educate people.
I'm just going to jump in here. That was so clear, Jenny. I love that. And I agree with that. I think the strategy is critical. And we also have to remember, and what we're learning is that there are areas of the world that are more ready for diversity in one area, but not another. And so, I feel like the gender piece, the male-female piece around the country has gotten some traction. As you talk about Malaysia and other countries that are interested in the women's voice. And I feel like women, they're half the population, have been starting to organize in orthopedics. But there are other aspects of diversity, and it can't just be about gender. It needs to be about racial differences, about differences in sexual orientation, as Jenny said earlier, physical disabilities, things like that. So as countries culturally are able to address those issues, it needs to be about more than just gender. And the other thing I'll say is that having a strategy is one thing. And I think this gets to the heart of the elephant in the room, I suppose. We can talk about the benefits that are very real for diversity and different voices speaking. And Jenny's outlined those from the McKinsey report. But unless the leaders of each country, of each organization, of each training program have an interest in changing the culture in their particular area, it's not going to happen. And so the change in culture, change in diversity, equity, and inclusion starts with the leader. And if the leader is not interested, the leader of a board, the leader of an organization, then it's going to get washed under the rug until the next group. And so I think we have to really be educating and perhaps trying to hold our leaders accountable for these type of things as well.
So actually on that point, Christine, what are some of the successful strategies that you all have actually noticed over the last few years that you all have been working with on this? And secondly, where do we start? If we've got a plain canvas, we've tried to do something in SICOT for this. Where does one start? What would you advise a society like us? From your experience in some of the successful strategies, and how do we start on this? We certainly are very keen. Our leaders are very interested. We want to push this agenda. How do we start?
You've already started by having these conversations. So bravo to you. As Jenny said, having a strategy, a very clear strategy that you relentlessly repeat and that the leaders believe in, and that has metrics for measurement, and however that would be measured in CICOT. Having a culture where the board of CICOT, holds each other accountable for achieving those metrics. The visible pieces of CICOT. Who do you have on your panels? What type of people are you showing? What type of people do you have on their board? What's the governance for your organization, and how do leaders get selected? This is a really critical piece where it keeps the culture many times where it is how do you choose those leaders? And is it a backroom conversation with only one type of person in the room that says, I like my friend here, let's put them up as president? Or is there a more transparent, open, unbiased way to select the best leader for the organization at the time, making sure that you are casting a wide net for who's out there? Those are some things.
Yeah. One of the first things we did at the Orthopaedic Association was to actually make the process of selection much more transparent for roles on committees in our organisation. So prior, it used to be lots of shoulder tapping going on, but now every single Orthopaedic Association appointment is advertised, and there's a constant background seeking to fulfil the strategy of being more diverse. So there's a lot of evidence that to really have the benefits of diversity, you need about 30% of any organisation to be diverse, or any board or committee. So we really need to strive for that, which is slightly different for when you have a multinational organisation. But you want people in that room who are committed to diversity, because there's also evidence that if the leadership is strong and behind it, it really drives the strategy forward. And even in 3 years since the Australian diversity strategy started, there is slow, not so slow cultural change. People have started going, oh, that's right, we don't have a diverse enough panel, we need to put someone on that months ahead, instead of, a week before going, oh my goodness, we forgot to put a woman, who are we going to bring around now? So the culture is definitely shifting, and it's really palpable.
And one of the other, just a very granular thing for the Academy, the U.S. Academy, in our committee appointment program now, when there's a committee that discusses potential new volunteers for committees or committee chairs or things like that, and when that group has a packet of information to prepare them for those discussions, if you have, let's say, an evidence-based orthopedic committee, it will then show to the selectors how many people are on that committee and what is the diversity spread on that committee. So as they look at new members, if there's 10 people on that committee and they're all white men, that's top of mind for the selectors then when they're looking at the new possibilities. And it might, if it's already a very diverse committee, that may be different than if there's absolutely no diverse voices in the room. You still obviously want to pick people who have done the right work and have been, are qualified to serve. But there are so many committees in many organizations that are entry level that just take some enthusiasm. And that's really, that can be anybody. So I think really being intentional about how we select people is a critical step, because that's how you have the outward face of your organization.
And I think, obviously in SICOT, there are nations where it's a very homogenous population, and there are nations where there's a very large population of one cultural background and a very tiny one of the other. And I think, you've just got to learn and know about your organisation and the different components and nations that make it up, so that you can sort of try to encourage diversity and diverse applicants for different committees from those nations.
And every now and then, ask beyond your board and ask for feedback, and be open to feedback about how you're doing. Because I think you might get some either feedback or some suggestions that would be helpful from your member nations.
But you also need those of the majority culture who are happy to champion, because they have a very strong influence. Having males champion gender diversity in orthopedics is so important when you're only, in my nation, 5% female. So that's a really big thing. We need male allies for gender, and we need allies for every other diverse group.
So I was really debating whether Gao and me should be hosting this, but then you've answered that question clearly. So we're supporting it. It's not a bad thing. Okay, no. Gao, over to you.
Thank you. Actually, I was going to ask you that, Jenny, just to make it really clear. And I think that's a very important point. So IODA is actually open to everyone to be volunteer members, and truly diverse.
We are happy to have orthopedic surgeons, people who are in orthopedic research, trainees, medical students. We also have quite a number of members who are from orthopedic industry. And in fact, some of the industries are quite a way ahead of us in their own diversity strategies. So we're working together to try and make the orthopedic environment more diverse. And there's a lot of collaboration that can happen along the way. Collaboration is some of the fun part of really driving diversity.
And the message I'm getting so far, Jenny, is basically that leaders matter, and basically every large society should have a mini IODA within it, correct? And every selection process and every appointment and every decision really should have a diversity quotient attached to it. And the only way we can do that is to have leaders and a small subcommittee within that champions that right. Why is it, Jenny, do you think that orthopedics has generally lagged behind with diversity championing? I mean, we seem to be much slower than a lot of other subspecialties. Is there something that we are historically disadvantaged against, or is there some kind of code that we are not addressing that we should change?
I think, there have been orthopedic role models and stories for such a long time. And, 100 years ago, before you did need to be very large and strong when you had no automated equipment. So it arose from there. And Christy, do you have any other comments? That is my general feeling of how it occurred.
And perhaps it was it appealed more in the very, very early days to more of a stereotypical, use your hands and be a carpenter type of, heavy equipment type of work. But I think right now it is really telling that the other surgical subspecialties, at least in the United States, ENT, urology, neurosurgery, vascular surgery, all have higher percentages, at least of women. And why is that? Because those are surgical specialties. They have the differences in lifestyle. But orthopedics is different, and it's a much lower percentage, specifically of women and certainly of underrepresented minorities. So I really go back to that culture piece. I think, at least in the United States, we just have this culture where it is a little bit of a club, and we have to break into that. And I think, the thing that excites me is to see different people leading our university programs, our residency programs, chair of departments that are not just white men. And I think that's going to have a much quicker change, because as you see people during your training who are leading and walking that walk that look different, that's going to educate a whole new generation of surgeons who are going to think differently about who the leaders can and should be. And so we don't have very many, but we probably have 6 or 7 now female chair of departments. And 3 or 4 years ago, we had none. And so think about the exponential effect of training all those trainees.
I think the other important thing we need to talk about is flexibility, because, having a more flexible workforce, it will bring in a lot more people who have other challenges, who, particularly women, because we do childbear and there is no getting around that. And having flexibility is not just good for women of childbearing ages. It's actually very good for men who might want to explore some sporting prowess or other thing they're running parallel, whether it's academic with their career. So it allows people to step in and out of training as they require for their competing interests or needs, whether they have a sick partner or relative. There are a whole lot of reasons that having a more flexible workforce will make us more diverse as well. And some other specialties have been much better at adopting that.
Yeah, fair point. We've got a couple of questions coming from the audience as well. We've got a fairly good audience here. And the first question, a tough one, what's the difference between equity and equality? Have you all had a chance to discuss this, Jenny and Ioda?
Well, I can say, equality is when you give 2 people exactly the same thing. Equity is when you give 2 people what is required to reach the same goal.
Yep, exactly. It's not treating everybody the same per se. The equity recognizes that people are different and they have different circumstances.
And so, that might be someone who's come from a disadvantaged background, who wants to get into training or medical school, has had not quite the same education, but is very capable of being a really brilliant orthopedic surgeon, but needs a little assistance or someone to mentor them. It's things like that that can make a very big difference in making our workforce more diverse.
And another question that's come up is, what are the positive changes that you all have seen over the last 5 years in terms of the work that you all have been doing, and some of the challenges or the disappointments as well in the last 5 years?
Do you want to start, Christy?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we've seen incremental change in people who participate or are in the field of orthopedic surgery from a diverse standpoint. We've seen around the globe countries, as we mentioned, that are more interested or more successful in this realm. And so I think that gives me great hope as people start having more conversations about this. I mean, you just look at the topics on a number of different orthopedic organization and association agendas, and it's not infrequent to have a conversation around something in the diversity space. And so we're talking about things more, and I think that's going to lead to change. I still worry about the culture, and I worry about when you see things like Speak Up Ortho and other groups out there that are highlighting some of the continued discrimination or harassment of folks that are not, the majority culture, that's concerning, and we really have to hold people accountable for their behavior. So we really have to work on the culture piece.
Jenny, from your end? Yeah.
I would say that visibility, a number of diversity advocates around the world, the volume of publications on diversity and the research going into diversity, particularly coming out of the US, is really impressive. So we're learning more, we're gathering more data. We've now got gender data on nearly 70 nations, and that is in itself a little disappointing because not a single nation has reached 30% female orthopaedic members, which are required to supposedly gain the benefits of diversity. So the highest up in around Scandinavia and Northern Europe is around 28%. So we've got a long way to go there. But I would also say that there are so many women and gender diverse people now networking together and being able to assist in getting those groups together and empowering them to take action is really phenomenally exciting. Putting people together and seeing things come of that, whether it's networking across the world to see what has happened in Europe or Australia or the UK, and how that might be initiated down in South America, for instance. It's very exciting. It's also eye-opening to see one of our board members from the Middle East, how progressive some of the Middle Eastern nations are with orthopaedics. And they're doing women's workshops. They've got 10% female trainees. Your preconceptions are really blown away when you look at what's happening around the world.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm really excited that IODA will be participating in our next SICOT Congress in KL. And I think Margaret Falk has been, our new program chair, has been instrumental in trying to facilitate this. I'm really looking forward to that symposium. And I think so will our membership. Jenny, there's a question here, which I think we've touched on partly already, about how international medical students and graduates can be involved in creating a more diverse orthopedic global community. And if there's any way they could perhaps collaborate with a society like SICOT in outreach programs. Is that something that IODA has seen in any of your member nations, have had experience with? Or are there any tips and tricks that you could share about how medical students and international graduates can get involved in this through a society or otherwise?
In terms of medical students, there are quite a few medical student groups. In Australia, we have medical students who are interested in surgery, and a lot of them have either attended local events or watched webinars or been involved in other ways, sought out mentorship. So those are some of the ways they can get involved. If they want someone who's a mentor in their region, we can put them in touch with people. If they want to get more involved, we'd love some volunteers to come and help. At IODA, we've got a lot of work to do. So we regularly advertise for people to get involved in that way. So those are the main things I can think of offhand. There is also a more international surgical society for students as well, so they can get involved in those ways.
And so IODA is also open to medical students and not just orthopedic surgeons.
Right.
Lovely. Okay. Any final comments from either yourself, Jenny, or Christy, that you'd like to share with the audience as parting points or summary points that you'd like them to take away from this webinar?
Christy?
Well, I just thank you for having the conversation. This is it's always empowering to talk about these things and hope that we're lighting a spark in somebody who may be listening to make a change. There are other Jenny Greens out there that are going to transform the international landscape. So that's exciting. And I guess I just, I encourage people, there may be people listening who are in parts of the world where it's really frustrating and where it seems like maybe orthopedics is not the field that they're going to be able to get into or something like that. But I would say be persistent. Be persistent and find like tribe members that are passionate about this and folks that can support you, mentors. Don't give up on your dreams. We're gonna evolve our field over time to have a different culture. Absolutely.
And I'd just like to finish off with a few thoughts about how you can change things. Making visible role models in your organisations, trying to mitigate any unconscious biases you have in selecting trainees into orthopaedics or promoting people onto committees, looking at more flexible training and flexible workplaces, and finally, really the mentoring and sponsorship of diverse individuals is really important. So we want to be more diverse because it is really better for our organisations, but there is so much evidence that being a more diverse specialty helps us mitigate all the inequities in our healthcare. So that's our primary aim.
Well, thank you very much, Jenny and Christy, for being on our Pioneer Tete-a-Tete session. It's been an absolute pleasure. Lots of pearls of wisdom there. This is being live webcasted and will go on to our website and be watched on demand as well by our international global audience. So as you had said, I think it will hopefully light a spark in at least enough people that it will send on a ripple effect to create many more Jenny Greens, as you said, Christy. And on that note, thank you very much once again from SICOT Pioneer and SICOT to both of you and to all our global audience joining us on this Pioneer Tete-a-Tete. This is our feedback QR code. We'd love to hear from you about any further future topics, any questions specific to either of our panelists or even to IOTA. Any questions about how to join, etc., and be involved in the activity. But I'd also like to know about how we can make this learning experience better for the future. So please send and share your feedback. Okay. This is our next live webinar on the 14th of January, and this will be in about 3 weeks' time. This is part of a series of research e-events, the second out of 4. So please join us on this session on the 14th of January, 2022. And on that note, thank you very much once again to both our panelists and everyone joining us. Have a great weekend. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. And you've certainly lighted a spark for us to do more and think about this a lot more as well, both in the leadership panel and otherwise. Thanks a ton. Have a great Christmas and New Year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You too.